This is the Khmer Times News. My name is Paolo Bonini, and these are your headlines. A police chief is jailed for bribery. A senior monk accuses boys of theft and then cuts off their fingers. And why is it everyone seems to be panicking about air quality of late? But firstly, it's to our headline story, and it was a huge takedown of a man in a very high position indeed, as the chief of the drug squad in Takao now sits in prison. The headline read, "Head of the Anti-Drug Crime Bureau of the Takao Provincial Police charged with the abuse of power and bribery." The senior police officer has now not only been arrested and charged by the Takao Provincial Court, but he has also been jailed and is awaiting trial for allegedly receiving payments from a drug gang in exchange for turning a blind eye to their illegal activities, going as far as to allow them to ply their trade without any interference at all by his drug enforcement officers, making sure that they could deal drugs freely. According to the Takao Provincial Court, the chief of the Anti-Drug Office of Takao Province stands accused of accepting bribes and the abuse of power, and he now faces a prison term of between 5 and 15 years. This extremely high-profile bust came about when a member of the criminal gang was arrested with drugs, and under police questioning, he confessed not only his role within the gang, but also that he had paid bribes to the drug chief so that they could deal their dope without any hindrance. After the drug dealer's confession, a year-long investigation into the chief started, and now he sits in jail and awaits his trial. This case may well throw up even more leads as the tangled web of deception now slowly starts to unravel. On this week's Crime Desk, a pagoda chief cuts off small children's fingers. Yes, I did just say that. A man in a murderous frenzy slaughters his father-in-law, and Mr. Dollar strangles a taxi driver to steal his car, but he makes a huge balls up of it. Firstly, let us start with the unbelievable. When I saw just the headline alone, I knew I was going to put this story into the show, as it had so many angles. It's shocking, it's gross, and it is wholly unique. It really is the most shocking headline of the year, and that headline read, "Ex-pagoda chief jailed for cutting off fingers of novice monk." Yes, a man has cut off the fingers of a young boy that resided in a pagoda and was training as a monk. A Mr. Mao Vibble, the chief monk of Tol An Kun Pagoda, was arrested last week. Now, this former senior monk has been charged and jailed for allegedly cutting off the fingers of a novice monk and a pagoda boy. Not just one victim, as the headline may suggest, but two. And he did it in a fit of anger over an accusation of theft. The incident occurred one evening when Vibble accused a 16-year-old novice monk and a 15-year-old pagoda boy of stealing. The thefts, it said, included rice and noodles. The senior monk got angry at the thefts, then did something that is very hard to say, let alone do. He reportedly took an old blade. He then forced the young boy's hands down on a table, and he slowly cut the fingers off each boy. After Vibble had mutilated them, he expelled the two victims from the pagoda that night. The injured boys returned to their families, who then reported the incident to local authorities. Vibble was very quickly defrocked and expelled from the pagoda. This case has shocked an entire nation, and Vibble himself now faces a prison term of 5 to 10 years for his outrageous act. So after that unbelievable horror show, let's move on. Now, let's have a look at a car. It's a jolly ordinary car in a rather revolting colour. So why am I showing you it? Well, I wish to ask you a question. If you were to steal a car such as this, how would you do it? Maybe you'd get a copy of the key, or maybe you would hotwire it. After all, there are many different ways to steal a car. And this man on your screen, he did want to steal a car. But not only is he the blurriest man we have ever featured, he is also a contender for the least mentally agile, as his unbelievably bad plan for stealing a vehicle was to get a taxi to pick him up and then strangle the driver to death. And that is really daft. The headline read, "Man arrested for strangling taxi driver, stealing car." The man police arrested for this crime had the most affluent of names, though, for he is called Mr. Dollar. Yes, I promise you that is his actual name, Mr. Dollar. The police report states that at about 5 p.m. one evening last week, Mr. Dollar hired a taxi to take him to Prey Veng province. But when the car reached a quiet spot in the road, the suspect asked the driver to pull over, pretending he needed to urinate. But as soon as the car slowed down, the suspect leant forward and wrapped electric wires around the taxi driver's neck. The driver's eyes bulged. He frantically grasped at his neck to try and remove the tightening wires, but it was all in vain. His legs thrashed wildly as the life was literally squeezed out of him. After a fierce struggle, the driver fell unconscious. It was then Mr. Dollar left the back seat of the car. He opened the driver's door and he dragged the driver out of his seat and dumped him by the side of the road, thinking he was dead. He then drove off. But he had made one huge mistake. The driver was soon revived by the cold night air and he summoned help. And seeing he had not only seen his assailant and spoken to him at length, it was not long before he was standing in front of Mr. Dollar again, and Mr. Dollar was duly arrested. It is a classic case of when good sense does not make a dollar. Now then, I almost did not do this story as I saw the headline and thought to myself, nah, this is just another family argument or drunken brawl that ended up in murder. But no, it's something very different. This week, the headline read, "Family seeks life sentence for ungrateful son who stabbed stepfather to death." Now, the ungrateful stepson is one stone-cold killer. He really wanted his stepfather dead. The murder itself occurred back in December and now has been heard in the courts, and the details that are coming out are shocking indeed. And the killer, a 36-year-old male named Mr. Vishna, has been sentenced to life imprisonment. Now, the killer in this tale planned his murder, but he had made one huge mistake, and I will reveal that mistake at the end of the story. On the day of the murder itself, the killer rode a motorbike from Battambang City to the victim's house in Phnom Penh, and that's no small distance. It's nearly 3 hours solid driving when you're on a small bike. When he arrived at his stepfather's house, he parked his bike outside of the property to make sure he was concealed by a fence. Then, in the darkness, he stealthily moved towards the house. He cut the wires outside the building and the electricity shut off. So did the security cameras. With the house now plunged into darkness, the calculating killer made his move. He armed himself with a long blade and he burst through the front door of the house and he threw his victim to the floor. He then plunged the knife into the victim's chest over and over and over again, making mincemeat of his internal organs. When the stabbing frenzy was over, the living room was splattered with blood and the father-in-law lay dead, draped over a broken chair. The killer fled in the night, but he was soon caught as he had forgotten something. It was not just his victim's house that had CCTV, but also other properties nearby. And it is them that recorded him both entering and leaving the area of the crime. And for that, he had absolutely no defense. And now he starts his lifetime in jail. And we end this week with a news story that forced itself upon me like a dog that takes a fancy to your leg and won't let go. Woof. The story was all about air quality, or the lack of it. And I have never had a story invoke such a response. It started with voice messages, then text, and finally people in bars asking me about this very story, including this guy, Chris Emerson, who did not want to be identified. Now, what Chris and others did was they took all their toys and threw them out of their prams with an extra big sigh of disgust when they saw this headline. Phnom Penh ranks as second most polluted city in the world this morning, according to live IQ Air results. Oh my God, we're all going to die, and it's everyone's fault, and I am outraged. That seemed to be the general response to this story. And yes, I agree with you that the headline is shocking, but, and it's a but big enough to suit a particularly large Shire horse, one needs to read the headline. Note how it says this morning, not forever. The massive drop in air quality was quite simply an anomaly, caused by various factors. But hold on, this is the newsman for the Khmer Times. He's going to start the cover-up right now, as he's paid to do so. Wrong again. I write my own words, and these are the unadulterated facts. This is Phnom Penh today by the exact same air quality survey. And the map is orange, not from the haze, but the colour denotes the air is just below good and is moderate in quality. Please note there's a whole load of grades down, but only one up. And that one up air is the type of air you only ever see in adverts for butter. It's that good. So, what happened? Why the big panic? Well, there was an increase in air pollution last week due to smoke emissions from industrial plants, cars, etc. But also Cambodia was affected by winds blowing in from South China Sea, bringing with it concentrations of air pollution from surrounding countries, much of it from burning crops, which admittedly does also happen here in the kingdom. You see, wind-blowing pollutants and spiking bad air quality is not unusual. Have a think about this. Can you imagine dust from the Sahara Desert sweeping over England? Well, it does, and it is very regular. In fact, the Met Office in the UK says Saharan dust is relatively common in the UK, often happening several times a year when dust storms in the Sahara coincide with southerly wind patterns. So, there you go. The air quality for Phnom Penh is, in fact, very acceptable, especially for a capital city in Asia. And yes, it took a terrible dip, but that dip was one bad lungful. And one bad lungful does not make Phnom Penh the gates of Hades. It's time to have a look ahead and see what the weather has in store for us next week. And here we are at the weather. But firstly, let's slide on over to our photo of the week just to make the weather a bit more interesting. And I took this photo and I really love it. It reminds me of a Constable painting in so many ways, because as we gently zoom in, what we see this is all about is these two fishermen out there in the fields. Absolutely glorious. If you don't go out in the countryside, do it. I promise you, your health and your mental health especially will get a lot better. So let's slide that bit of beauty to the side and go to the weather itself. Now then, oh, hold on. I've done it again. I've got the... I can't get it up. Do you know what? Maybe I should get a lady in or someone, an assistant to help me get it up with the weather. Because, right, there it is. It's up in the upright. And I can see it. And what do we got? Oh, have a look at that. We've got a high of 34 degrees this week. Humidity around the 40%. But we have absolutely no chance of rain. This has been the Khmer Times News. Please do subscribe and comment and stay up to date with all the breaking news by following us on both Facebook and Telegram. This has been Paolo Bonini, and that was the week that was. I'll see you next weekend for your weekly roundup.